And she's going to be talking to us about compassion fatigue. And I know Sally is more than happy for interjections, questions throughout her presentation. And no further delay, Sally, it's all yours.
Thank you, Julie. Hi, I want to welcome everybody here, and I wanted to express my appreciation to the nurses and to ancillary staff for all of the work that you do. I hope the nurses have a great Nurses Week, and I hope you've had a great Nurses Week up to this point and have a wonderful, continuing, fabulous week. What I'm going to be talking about is compassion fatigue. I'm going to present 5 different parts of compassion fatigue. I would like to talk about the history of compassion fatigue, how it came about. I would like to give a definition of compassion fatigue, talk about symptoms, how do we know that this is something that we're going through. I would like to also offer some solutions for compassion fatigue, and then talk about why this is important. So, to begin with, the person that is mostly responsible for developing this is Dr. Charles Figley. He's the director of the Florida State University Traumatology Institute and president of Green Cross. So Dr. Figley, when he had a couple of different roles, he would be working with veterans of war, talking with them about their post-traumatic stress disorder, about their experiences in combat, and the other position that he had was an advisor for postdoctoral students. He was responsible for advising them, talking with them about what he was learning about, and sharing with them. So Dr. Figley would basically be working with these men and women who came back from combat and telling him very horrible stories of war, about mutilation, about people losing limbs, children being decapitated, villages being ravaged, and he would be hearing all of these things. He listened to these veterans, these Vietnam veterans and other veterans of Afghanistan, and this was going on for a while. His postdoctoral students, when he would meet with them, they would kind of say to him, "Are you okay? Like, what's going on here? You're irritable, did you have enough coffee today? What about, your wife is calling you, you're not picking up the phone, you look depressed, you look very sad, what is happening to you?" And Dr. Figley was kind of taking this under advisement. He was smart enough to know something was happening to him. He would hear these stories and he would be terribly, terribly depressed. He would be sad, he would have feelings of hopelessness. And thanks to his students who brought this to his awareness and who observed these symptoms in him, he started developing this system of naming it as compassion fatigue. And what he says about it is, he offers a definition. Compassion fatigue is a state experienced by those helping people in distress. It is an extreme state of tension and preoccupation with the suffering of those being helped to the degree that it is traumatizing for the helper. He further goes on to offer a quote, and I think this says a lot. In his work and in noticing other people going through this, other people in these positions, he states, "We have not been directly exposed to the trauma scene, but we hear the story told with such intensity, or we hear similar stories so often, or we have the gift and the curse of extreme empathy, and we suffer. We feel the feelings of our clients. We experience their fears. We dream their dreams. Eventually, we lose a certain spark of optimism, humor, and hope. We tire. We aren't sick, but we aren't ourselves." So, with this compassion fatigue, how does this differ from compassion satisfaction and burnout? So we have compassion fatigue here, we have compassion satisfaction, and we have burnout in the middle. So let me just say something about compassion satisfaction. Compassion satisfaction is about the pleasure you derive from being able to do your work well. For example, you may feel it is a pleasure to help others through your work. You may feel positively about your colleagues or your ability to contribute to the work setting or even the greater good of society. We all feel that, right? As far as burnout, I think a lot of people know what burnout is. It's a gradual over time frustration with your job. It's not trauma related. Specifically, what compassion fatigue is vicarious trauma. It's secondary trauma. Basically, you hear very horrible stories and you take on, you feel what your patient is feeling. So who experiences compassion fatigue? Anybody that works with patients in a caregiver role in a professional manner can experience compassion fatigue. That includes nurses, obviously, social workers, therapists, everybody that works with individuals who has that, who has trauma. The social workers, and there's a susceptibility as far as developing compassion fatigue for 3 reasons. I'm a social worker in the ER. I have rooms 13, 30, 31, and 12. So when I go into a room and I am assessing someone and I listen to what they're telling me about that they want to kill themselves, they want to kill someone else, they've thought about murdering their parents, they've attempted murdering their parents, which are true. I mean, these are true stories. Or have children that they have just lost. Many, 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 many stories, as all of you have probably heard. So when I'm in the room with them, after they tell me these things, I can't turn to them and say, you think you've got problems? My husband was on the internet checking chickie websites. No, you can't say that. It's a non-reciprocal relationship. It's a relationship you give, they take. It's a non-reciprocal. It's no sharing. You're not a friend. You're not a friend. You're a professional. You're taking data in. You're trying to develop a plan. It's a non-reciprocal relationship. The second point to that is that you're isolated. Rarely, in the event of hearing these things, you can't go back. And I mean, I'll tell the doctor what I heard, as well as you'll tell the doctor what you heard, but you can't, you're isolated in terms of that sharing, in terms of how that affected you. You can't go to somebody and say, oh my God, I just heard this horrible story and oh my God, I'm gonna cry. You don't have that opportunity many times. You're lucky if you do, but most of the times you don't. The third point to that, why we are susceptible to compassion fatigue, is that many times, we pick our professions for certain reasons. There's a lot of psychology out there, and you probably heard some of it. There's theories that people that get into a helping profession have a reason for doing that. Many times people that are in a helping profession have been victimized, they've been neglected, they've been abused, they've been, for whatever reason, they know how it feels and they want to help another person. So that is already making us susceptible to experiencing compassion fatigue. So what are the symptoms? If you walk into your station and your shift coordinator says, "Good morning, Mary, how are you?" and you tell her to go to hell, if you have a job by the end of the day, that's a symptom. Anger is one of the symptoms. There's chronic lateness is one of the symptoms. Depression, Abusing drugs or alcohol, do you go home after a bad day and drink a 6-pack of beer? You don't have to answer that. Frequent headaches, gastrointestinal complaints, high self-expectations, hopelessness, hypertension, the inability to maintain balance of empathy and objectivity. Increased irritability. When your coworkers talk with you, are you irritable? Do you go home and are irritable with your family? Do you have poor concentration, second guessing, detachment, emotional exhaustion, physical exhaustion, intrusive thoughts, chronic fatigue, sadness? Many people experience this. Many coworkers, many people experience this. It's a way of coping with compassion fatigue. So, with that being said, what do you do about it? If you feel like you are experiencing compassion fatigue, what do you do about it? Well, the first thing that you could do is just take stock with what's on your plate. What are you doing? How much do you have? How much is on your plate? Do you have parents that you care for? Do you have a sick dog at home? Do you have children that are developmentally disabled? In addition to coming to your job and working with patients that have trauma, that have been traumatized, what can you let go? Start a self-care idea collection. This could be good. Work with friends, get some friends over, have a couple glasses of wine, and make a list of ideas that you would like to do or possibly can't afford to do at the moment, but that you thought about doing. Something new might emerge that you hadn't even thought of. Number 3, find time for yourself every day. I'm sure many of us have been on airplanes, and if you remember, when you're on an airplane and if you are in an aisle where the wing is there, the flight attendant, or whatever they call them, will come down the aisle and tell you if we drop an altitude and that oxygen mask drops down, put that on yourself and not on your child. Also, if you're religious or even if you have had exposure to the Bible says love your neighbor as yourself. Not more than yourself, not less than yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. Delegate. Learn to ask for help at home. If you think you've got too much going on, ask someone else to do the laundry. Have a transition from work to home. If you have 20 minutes or if you have 10 minutes leaving your job, when you get home, don't take your job home. If you work 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, leave it at work. Don't go home, kick your dog, holler at your husband, holler at your kids. It's very stressful. I mean, these jobs are very stressful. Learn to say no more often. Assess your trauma input. Figure out, like, if you're working in a hospital and you are exposed to trauma, when you get home, do you turn the TV on and listen to the news? Is that a good thing? Does that affect you after you've been here all day, listening to people, working with people? And I'm not saying, I mean, I think it's great to be as politically aware as you can, but just be aware of what the effect is. Learn more about compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. Consider joining a support group. Attend workshops on a regular basis. Consider working part-time. The last one is exercise. Try to spend some time doing something physical, yoga, doing some sport, exercising. I think basically the bottom line is to take care of yourself. And in the jobs that we do, it's unrealistic to think that we are not affected by these jobs, as it is unrealistic to think that we can go through water and not get wet. Basically, the end result is that if this is not addressed, if this is not taken care of, it affects everybody. It affects you, it affects your family, it affects your job. So I think it's difficult to do that, but it's so necessary to recognize if you do have symptoms of compassion fatigue. In the back, there are some questionnaires that you can take to see if any of those fit within kind of like what you're feeling. So what we've done is I've given you some history of compassion fatigue. I've defined the compassion fatigue, talked about symptoms, talked about solutions, and the global effect if that's not dealt with. Anybody have any questions?